My name is William TJ Sims, founder of Cythority, security engineer by trade.
So before Cythority, give us a brief background of like your cybersecurity jobs and what were you doing?
I got into cybersecurity, I tell people all the time, out of desperation.
When you were on the blue team, was there any type of security incident that you always remember?
So I noticed that there was an alert triggering for an admin account across 116 domain controllers compromised, showing ransomware activity with hands-on keyboard.
Now, here's another thing that I have discovered when I have clients that come from the MSSP background. When I'm interviewing them, a lot of their questions or the answers in that I would escalate it, but how do analysts shift that mindset?
The moment that you shift the priority and responsibility to the other team, to your colleague or your team members, that is the moment you get disqualified.
Hey, the only people who are saying working in a SOC is like the first starting point is like entry level, or a lot of the people who never did it, because the people who've done it don't necessarily call it entry level.
You know, I know SOC analysts making $180,000 a year. Would you call that entry level?
Welcome back, everybody, to TechtualChatter, and we have another banger for you guys. We have none other than Mr. William TJ Sims. You probably see him educating the masses on Instagram, LinkedIn, his company Cythority. He's doing big things. I like what he's doing with the culture and how he is raising up the next generation of SOC analysts. But without further ado, TJ, how you doing, man?
Doing good, my brother. Appreciate you having me.
No, thanks you for coming on. And I forget, we talked I think it might have been like a month ago. I can't remember the days of running together, but I remember him and I talked like 4 years ago. I went through the LinkedIn. I remember we had a quick chat. So I always like when I see people keep on doing their thing throughout the years, and you know, he just been applying pressure. But before we get into some of the fun stuff, how about you give the audience a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so for those listening, my name is William TJ Sims, founder of Cythority, security engineer by trade. Also like to consider myself a disruptor, futurist in tech. And I'm a father, husband, and provider. Just one of those people that, you know, latched on to cybersecurity early on about 10 years ago and used it as my vehicle to build financial freedom and be able to earn my time back and take care of my family. So that's really what I love to talk about. That's what I, stand for. That's the brand, vision, and movement of Cythority as we build the future of cybersecurity leaders. And yeah, man, I'm excited to be here. So I appreciate you having me.
No, perfect. So before Cythority, give us a brief background of like your like first kind of like cybersecurity jobs and what were you doing?
Yeah. So it's quite interesting. So I got into cybersecurity, I tell people all the time, out of desperation. I grew up 200% below the poverty line, single parent household. And for me, we grew up having the lights cut off, running out of food stamps, being evicted. And so, financial security was important. And so as I was growing up, I kind of, I was an athlete. I played basketball, I had hoop dreams, ball was life. But there came a certain point where I had to really evaluate, like, what does the rest of my life look like? And what am I going to do to, be able to earn a living and not be at the mercy of a person or a situation? And so, the two industries that I could think of were medical and technology. And I didn't feel like I wanted to go to school to become like a doctor or anything like that. I didn't feel like I had that in me. So technology was the next, most appealing, track that I could follow. And specifically data security. I was starting to hear that term fly around a lot, but I had no idea what it meant. And so I realized, like, okay, like I'm going to go explore this IT thing and see how it goes. And, and it wasn't an easy path. I went to 4 high schools, 3 colleges, I had a full scholarship right out of high school to Marist University, which was Marist College at the time. I was, on my last day of school, terminated, lost a full scholarship for a crime I didn't even commit, but I did have to, go through that, go through those times. And thankfully I was able to maintain my innocence a year later, but I did lose a full scholarship. And so I had to start from zero. And at that point, I figured out, okay, I'm going to go back to school for IT. I knew, that's what I wanted to pursue, because when I was a freshman, when you don't know what you want to do, you just kind of do liberal arts or you do business because that's what you do when you don't know what you want to do. And so, I went to school at Nassau Community Colleges in Long Island, and I was pursuing an associate's in IT because I was so poor that, I was able to go to school for free at the time. And, as I was on a break, it was November 2014. I was walking in Roosevelt Field Mall looking for a part-time job, and I was walking to Champs and H&M and all these different storefronts, and I passed Louis Vuitton, and something told me just go in there. And I have a kilogram jacket on. For those of you know what that is, True Religion sweats, a Scully, not presentable at all to go walk into like a store like Louis Vuitton, but something told me go in, and I did. And they said to me what everyone typically will say, the applications are done online, and so. But the gentleman at the door, he just said, you know what, hang on, I'll print one out for you. And so once he did that, I sat there, I filled it out immediately, and I handed it back into them. And then I walked out. And 30 seconds after I walked out, they gave me a call, and it was the manager who just got back from lunch. And he asked me if I was still around. And before he could even finish his sentence, I was already standing in front of him at the store. And he was like, listen, if you want to start in a week or so, we have a 30-day seasonal shift. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. I'm going from, thinking I'm going to work at Champs to now I'm working at Louis Vuitton selling $3,000 bags. And so my mindset was, if I can get into an environment like that, I can meet people who, maybe are doing something in the world of business, and I can brush shoulders with them and see how I can network. And that's exactly what I did. On day 23 of my 30-day shift, I met a gentleman who was getting ready to purchase a bag for his wife. And he was the director of the criminal investigations unit at the Department of Financial Services in Wall Street, downtown Manhattan. And so he had told me during that 45-minute duration of the sale, follow up with him closer to graduation, and we'll see if he can help me get an internship. And obviously the power is in not just the follow up, but the follow through. And that's exactly what I did. And I skipped over 800 applications, and I was able to land an internship at the Department of Financial Services on Wall Street, where I was interning 3 days a week, unpaid, but I was working in the cyber unit 3 days a week. And then that 30-day shift at Louis Vuitton ended, but that helped me get a job now at Rolex in the mall right around the corner. So I went from selling $3,000 bags to $60,000 watches, and now I'm interning in Wall Street in New York City while I'm in college. And so that kicked off the whole trajectory of my cybersecurity career. And I was able to graduate from Nassau. I transferred to a 4-year institution where I pursued a bachelor's degree in cybersecurity. And then I just went all in. I was doing everything under the sun, from the clubs, on the board of the National Association of Black Accountants. I was on the board of the Software Engineering Club. I built the Cybersecurity Center for Technology at my school, and I was a co-director. I did IT help desk. I did independent studies. And I was one of those people that was fortunate enough in 2018 to get a job 2 months before I graduated, making 6 figures at the #1 company in the United States at the time, which was Michelin, according to Forbes' best large employers. And the rest is history. So that's a little bit about how I started my career. And I'm happy to kind of talk about, that in more detail if needed.
No, man, that's nice, man. Especially the one thing I really picked up on was the fact that you said, hey, let me change my environment and try to find somebody who may be doing something that I'm interested in or can help me get there. And I think that's the biggest thing that we kind of run into is the whole proximity thing. Having proximity to people that do certain roles or have certain type of money. Like when you start doing that, then you're like, this guy's he's not and I'm pretty sure you saw this working there. Before you kind of see who has money or all this other stuff, most of us who are younger, we thought the rappers, the chains and the watches, and those would be the only people shopping there. Now you see regular people just in there shopping. And you say, okay, I could be a regular person and I can buy these things. How do I do it?
For sure. Yeah. And that was the thing that really attracted me the most was, at that time, this is when Instagram just came out, right? This is when, people were just starting to use Instagram. And I was like, technology is never going away, right? And so that right there met the criteria for me for pursuing this career, because I was like, I need to make sure that I always have a job in the future of work and information technology. Now that this realm is called the AI revolution, but at one point it was called the information technology. And so tech folks were getting the bag, and I knew that it's not just the ball players and the hoopers and the rappers. It's, you know, the tech visionaries and the founders. And so, yeah, it was amazing to see, because it's right. It's funny you say that. Right before I sold this gentleman a bag, I actually sold a belt and a hat to Chinks Drugs, the rapper from Queen. May he rest in peace. So I went from speaking to a guy like Chinks to then speaking to a gentleman who was a director of the criminal investigations unit. So you never know who you can meet in these type of environments.
No, definitely. Now, I was perusing, I like to use that word, your LinkedIn, and I was just looking at all the different titles of that you had in your career.
Sure.
Let me go back to it. Oops.
Yeah, there's a definitely a good amount there.
Yeah. Yeah, you worked at some great places. The funny thing too is I don't know how much you're on X or Threads, but there's also been these, not debates, but these talking points where people who've been in the industry 10 plus years, we've been telling people now, like, hey, slowly and quietly, but where you go to school at matters. And, you know, this is not discourage anybody who's going to the WGUs and other universities like that. But we've seen where some companies do take preference on if you went to a top 20 university, top 50, whatever, right? And also, we've been talking about how they also like your name recognition at certain companies you worked at. And like we said, we talk about positioning. And so I'm looking through your stuff, and you work for Michelin, you work for, and I can say all these names right before I keep talking.
Yeah. And they're not even all on there, but yeah, you can say them.
Exactly. We got Michelin, we got Fiserv, we got Microsoft on here. We have, let me see what else we got on here. You got a lot of stuff on here. If y'all don't know, guys, I'm really like scrolling up because it's a lot. Raytheon.
Yeah.
And a whole bunch of other stuff. And I'm, like I said, I'm with you. Everything's not on there because I do the same. Everything's not on there. But now, man, like you did security engineering, you did IR. Have you did like everything blue team or what?
Yeah, so I've always worked within the realm of security operations. So, you know, that's your CTI, your threat hunting, incident response, detection engineering. And so, you know, that's internal. So I've worked for companies' internal security operations as well as client facing. So from an MSSP perspective, where your client facing work with other clients and managing their security, their endpoints. But yes, always kind of within security operations, blue team for the most part, has where I spent a good majority of my career, for sure.
Yeah. So when you were on the blue team, do you have any, and this could be either some, I might phrase it like this, like, was there any type of security alert or incident that kind of like you always remember, like you either pull out of your back pocket when you're interviewing, or it's just like, it's something like so cool that you can always tell people about, like your investigation or something?
For sure. And that's a really good point that you mentioned. You got to have these cybersecurity stories in your back pocket, specifically when you're in an interview, because every one of these instances you are going, or you're supposed to attribute to what's called a leadership principle. And I learned that when interviewing at Amazon, and the reason why Amazon was even interested in me is because of the company that I worked at, which was Microsoft. And so that's where the name brands really start to kick in, because, you know, birds of a feather flock together. They want to hire the best talent. Yep. And so, but yes, there is. And one of the first questions you get asked in an interview, if you're interviewing for, you know, a security role, is, can you tell me about a time where you led an incident end to end? Or can you tell me about, you know, the most substantial incident that you've been a part of? And I love that question because I'm prepared for it. It's literally like a lob from the hiring team, because it gives you an opportunity to really shine and to articulate, you know, how you've had an impact. And so for me personally, there was a situation where I was working for a company, and this was an MSSP. And so I was monitoring a client environment, and I'm the only one on shift, but I noticed that there was an alert that came in through the Microsoft Defender EDR. For those of you listening who may not know what that is, that's a Microsoft product. It stands for Endpoint Detection and Response. And so it's an agent that gets installed on all of the endpoints within that client environment. And so one of those alerts went off. And when I looked at it, the first thing you do when you respond to an alert is you want to see, has there been any previous investigations related to this type of activity? Because if so, you can save yourself a lot of time, frustration, and energy, because now you can see, hey, this is benign activity. We've seen it before. It's triggered 10 times. It's expected. So now your anxiety levels kind of pan out because you're like, okay, this is not, a first time, we're seeing this. And so I immediately checked to see, is this something that we've seen before? Because I haven't seen activity for something like this on a domain controller or from an admin account. And so for those of you listening who may not be as technical or you're new, a domain, an admin account or a domain controller, think of that as an account or a system with elevated privileges. So it's not your general workstation. It's not, Sally that's in sales. This is someone who has elevated permissions, and it's a system that is essentially responsible for the entire network, because a domain controller is essentially the keys to the kingdom. That's where users, groups, policies are all configured. And so if that is compromised, essentially there's a lot of damage that can be done. And so I noticed that there was an alert triggering for an admin account across 116 domain controllers compromised, showing ransomware activity with hands on keyboard. And so that right there ended up turning out into a 2-month-long bridge call investigation where we were on a 24/7 call for 2 months. And the client was compromised. There was ransomware on the host. And again, this was something that spawned for 2 months. So we had to engage other vendors. It was a significant incident. And this was for a customer that was a $50 million contract. So what ended up happening was we were able to restore their systems over the course of that 2-month period. Again, other vendors, CrowdStrike, Booz, other vendors were also participating. So at a certain point, I did step back and then start to handle regular responsibilities. But I was the analyst on call who did respond to that alert. I was the analyst who did build the ticket. I was the individual who did spin up the bridge. And I was responsible for that initial communication with the stakeholders, with leadership, and with the customer. And being that we handled the situation with such grace and professionalism, we actually ended up getting that contract reinstated and extended, as well as I got promoted to a lead analyst effective immediately. And that was really cool because I was working with other people, other colleagues who were actually on my team that were at the company for 5 years, 12 years. And here I am, 11 months into my contract. So that was the most substantial incident that I ever worked, that I use when I walk into interviews to really be able to flex my muscles and show them that I've been in this situation before.
Yeah, man, I've seen that go both ways, right? When you are supporting a major client. Now, let me ask you this. I want to assume that you guys did what you're supposed to do because you got everything extended. Because I've been in the same situation where, granted, I was on shift at the time, but for months and weeks, they implemented a new rule for bloodhound. And like he was explaining earlier, when you think about a hound dog, you go hunting, a hound dog has a nose. It can smell any and everything, and it's trying to find whatever the prey is that you're hunting for. Well, bloodhound's doing the same thing in your environment, trying to get information so it can get access to your systems.
Yeah.
For the most time, my team was closing out with inadequate close notes. So before that, I told the detections team on the client side, I was like, hey, my guys are not doing this right. I know we're not. This thing should be firing so often that it's not being escalated.
Right.
They didn't adhere to it to where it had to be like 5 years ago. But luckily, I was not on shift. And we finally got hit by bloodhound. Finally got hit by that. And that led to some people getting moved off the contract and us having some openings and bringing on some other analysts. But what they found is it was fault on both sides. So it was some stuff that we missed, but it was also some controls and logs that they didn't have coming into us that we wouldn't have caught it anyway. So in this instance, I want to assume that you guys probably were going to catch it at the time you caught it and not before, based on some detections that maybe that they didn't have or controls they didn't have in place.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's actually quite common, especially when you're working for an MSSP. A lot of times you're limited with the amount of access that you have. So, you're responding to an alert. you're investigating, you're capturing the artifacts within that investigation, and then you're making recommendations to the client like, hey, look, these are the recommendations that we suggest that, you execute. But then at a certain point, it's up to the customer to implement those recommendations. And so they may or may not have the talent, they may or may not have the bandwidth. There's a lot of things that can happen that can interrupt that workflow, in totality. So yeah, it's definitely common. There's definitely a lot of challenges working for an MSSP. And when you have a customer that is maybe reluctant to change or systems in this instance, what ended up happening, the result was we ended up, and this wasn't necessarily my responsibility or my team, but the client ended up spinning up a brand new SIM tool to monitor those, I think it was 116 domain controllers, so that moving forward, though, we had the visibility and protection in place dedicated to those, endpoints. But yeah, it can be a challenge for sure. Security is a challenge in itself when you're just working in security, right? Because at the end of the day, you have to balance the business risk. Okay, you have to be able to understand the technical risk, and then we have to try to find a middle ground, because a stakeholder, a C-suite executive, they don't necessarily care so much about the cybersecurity risk. They care about production. They care about, revenue. They care about the business impact. So as a cybersecurity professional, we have to do a good job of communicating very technical concepts to people who are non-technical and be able to attribute the cybersecurity risk and the business impact. And that is what we get paid for.
Yeah, no, great. Now, piggybacking off of our MSSP talk, why do you think certain analysts that work in those type of environments struggle to either, one, get promoted, or two, they struggle to get roles for internal SOCs?
It's a great question. I think a variety of factors. Every environment that I've ever worked in, whether it be an MSSP or internally, is struggling with a significant amount of false positives and noise, because, as an analyst, you're not just responsible for, responding to an alert. You're responsible for responding to that alert within a timely manner, and also providing additional context to your engineering team, your detection engineers, or whatever team is responsible that builds those rules and those detections, to provide more meaningful insights on how we can make those alerts better. And so that will also help them build better detections that map to frameworks like MITRE. For those of you who may be listening, MITRE is an open source framework that maps different tactics, techniques, and procedures. And a lot of these different alerts map back to MITRE. And so we want to make sure that we're providing that additional context, because if we're spending so much time working these benign false positive alerts that are just an easy, quick copy and paste close, or from your experience, maybe you're just, closing them out without context, right? At the end of the day, when that weekly, monthly report gets sent to leadership, because you best believe that working in security, the work that we do directly goes to CISOs, CISOs, CTOs, and eventually the chief executive officer. And those conversations, those reports end up being, introduced in the conversations where we have, additional budgets that get allocated, or team expansion and whatnot. And so I think a lot of times these analysts get pigeonholed because they get comfortable working these alerts, and they don't do a good job of communicating what they're seeing effectively to produce a more mature organization. And so they get comfortable just doing the busy work, and then the high impact work kind of never gets started, which is the threat hunting, which is use case tuning and development. Those are the types of things that a manager, director, CISO are going to want to see, because it makes them look good to the stakeholders and to their board that they're doing other higher impact tasks, not just responding to alerts like a queue monkey or in a hamster wheel, and actually like moving the company forward and expanding the visibility and the detection capability.
Right on. Now, here's another thing that I have discovered when I have clients that come from that MSSP background is, like you said, there's a limitation because of what the client may let you have access to or not have access to. So when I'm interviewing them, a lot of their questions or the answers in that I would escalate it to so and so.
Right.
So my other question was going to be like, how, and because we'll get into more of what you do later on, but how do analysts shift that mindset instead of answering that as if like they're still tier one escalating to tier two? They don't know how to understand that in this interview, they're asking you as if you're tier two, tier three, and you're going to handle the part of what you typically escalate. They're expecting you to have an answer for what you do once it's escalated to you. How do you think they should start going about trying to shift that mindset into different things for those interviews?
That is so important. Like, the fact that you're even bringing this up is amazing, because the moment that you shift the priority and responsibility to the other team or to your colleague or your team members, that is the moment you get disqualified. Companies want to see you and hear you say, I led, I spearhead, right? They don't want you to put that, because the moment you leverage, oh, I collaborated with the engineering team, that right there tells them that you weren't the point person. They want people who can get and join their team, hit the ground running, effective immediately, and be able to mature their junior analysts and their teammates. So you want to speak from a first person perspective, and it all boils down to what I call leadership principles. And again, when I was working at Microsoft, that really opened up a lot of doors and opportunities, because now some of the other big players in the FANG and the Mag 7 were interested in me, Amazon being one of them. And if you know anything about interviewing with Amazon, they have a very strenuous interview process. It's 5 rounds. It's technical, behavioral, situational. But what I learned from that process is that when you're going through an interview, companies want to see that you've been in that position before. They want to know how you think. All right. And they're going to try to walk you to your edge, meaning they're not going to just settle for one response. They want to peel that back 3 times and get to a place where you finally say, I don't know, or I'm not sure, because that's a complete sentence, and that's okay. But they really want to dial in on people who have been in those positions, and you have to articulate yourself in a way that attributes everything to a leadership principle. And so what is a leadership principle? Well, tell me about a time where you took ownership. Tell me about a time where you dove deep. Tell me about a time where you displayed and emulated customer obsession. Tell me about a time where you were frugal, and not frugal in the sense that you're cheap, but frugal in the sense that you made do with as little resources as possible. Maybe there was a time where you didn't have what you need, but you still had to get the job done. How did you approach that situation? What challenges did you run into? And what was the result? That is the level of context and detail that you have to be prepared to answer, not just simply say, well, I worked with the engineering team and escalated it. That right there, once you mention that escalation point, you're telling them that your job is done, or that it was done, and therefore you put it onto someone else's plate. And that's going to happen sometimes. But you want to make sure that you have these reference stories in your memory bank that you can pull from and use as ammo in an interview. That's what we teach you within like a program like ours. That's part of the interview training and the preparation, not just being able to read from a resume that you copied from ChatGPT.
Yeah, definitely. And trust me, I could go into that so much of how many people I've met that got their resume done through ChatGPT, or they ran it through LLMs, but it still doesn't sit right. And I'll just say, like, to add on, to pick it back on what you said, is if you are in an environment where you do have to escalate it and it's a handoff, I would advise you to go look at what happened after you handed it off. So yeah, maybe you didn't do the stuff, but if you start researching those more and more, making friends with those people on those other teams, you'll start getting insight to where, hey, maybe you didn't do it. But if you're asked a scenario-based question in an interview, you could say what your next action items would be after you found something malicious on the host. Because that's what happens a lot of times. People, when I ask them, okay, so what would you do to rectify the situation? Typically, we escalate it to the client. But now your answer would be, well, hey, I would remove this, contain this, do that, do that, do this, do this, do this. And then the interviewer say, okay, cool. They're matching up with what we're looking for. So if you can't do it, learn what's being done, practice your answers, try to replicate it over in your own home lab or something one day. But that's a good step in the direction for you, because that's what's happening now. A lot of people earlier on, I would say, like in a lot of the SOC interviews and everything else, they got used to, hey, what is port 20? Was port 25? All those kind of questions you can go memorize on Google. They got like the top 100 cybersecurity analyst things. But now I've seen where I've had to do like 60 minutes. They'll give you an assessment for like a AWS security investigation, and they'll give you a scenario. And to make it harder, to say, hey, turn your camera on and we're going to mirror your screen. So now you can't get out of, you just memorize some stuff. You're going to have to know what you said, based on what's on that resume. Yeah, so companies are now asking you really good scenario-based questions. And if you cannot answer them, that is where your knowledge gap is currently.
For sure. And just to kind of piggyback off that, like you mentioned, what kind of separates a good analyst from a great one is that follow-up, is the follow-up in that work. So if you're not doing something because you had to escalate or it's a permission issue, that's okay. But understanding the workflow after it left your hands, that is your responsibility, because that's how you ultimately get better at your job. That's how you grow. That's how you enhance your skill set, and I think that's important, understanding, being curious. That's another leadership principle, being curious. And so that right there is a great example. Hey, there was a time where I had to investigate an incident, and I found, I confirmed that there was malicious activity based on the artifacts that I, documented. And then I was forced to escalate to the customer with the following recommendations. And what I did was, I followed up with the engineering team or with the customer to confirm what steps did they take. Did they, contain or isolate or eradicate, or what steps they took to then, after I handed this off and escalated, so that I can be more informed and so that I can do a better job the next time I'm presented with this type of situation. So yeah, I just wanted to echo that, because it's important for you to really, even if it's like, on a new shift, or you're reaching out to, a manager or a senior analyst or engineer, getting with them, understanding, like, it's not just your role. And so, when it comes to, working in an enterprise environment, a lot of times people make a mistake of only thinking very shallowly within their team. And so it's our job to step outside of that and really think about the overall business as a whole, and understanding other teams that work with you cross-functionally, and people who are in your chain of command, understanding their role and what's important to them, and things that are on their plate and on their radar and what they're struggling with, will help you do a better job, and ultimately help you grow in the organization, and even outside of that as a professional.
Yeah, no, right on. And that's the other part, is like, right, you want to make sure that you're following up on maybe what happened, so you can make sure they did it right. Like, even let's say like you're at an MSS and you probably know what to do. So now you say, okay, they didn't handle this right. So now you go to whoever that person reports to, like, hey, we escalated this to you guys, and this is what was in the close notes, but this is not going to rectify the issue. So if you know that much too, you can start taking a step further and actually start shining even more in your role, from being technical and also being a leader, because you're showing, like you said, those leadership principles as you're going to make sure things are done. And I'll tell you, even when you don't think someone is watching in the org, they're watching.
Yeah.
And so you don't even have to, because I was talking about something on my page one day, and I got a comment where someone thought I was pretty much telling them how I was able to get off night shift and be part of the daytime. Because, daytime's a little bit more critical, more visibility, everything's more going on. And I was telling them the difference between stepping on people's toes and doing a great job. I was like, I was just doing a great job. I didn't come up there to say, hey, they did this wrong, they did this wrong. I was at night shift and saying, hey, I was reviewing some documentation, I realized this was out of date, or I was triaging an alert, and it said do this, but this didn't make sense, or we're seeing all these things fired, but based on whatever our configurations are, we shouldn't even be alerting on those because we're protected. So I just was making suggestions on what I seen, and it was pretty much just more than what the people doing the day were doing. So it wasn't me saying, hey, the day team's not doing anything. I just doing a really great job. So that's why I was trying to explain to them what the difference between coming in to kind of rub people the wrong way versus just doing an excellent job.
Yeah, and you'll probably get a shout out from leadership if you do, identify an area of improvement, or maybe there's something that was missed. So it is important to follow up and follow through, selfishly, to make sure that you're learning and understanding, like, okay, this is where my edge is, and I want to go beyond that, but also to make sure that things are being done, correctly. So, yeah, none of that goes unnoticed.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like, just like you, in that situation with that client, I was like the only person that they brought from the team to come meet them in Burbank. That was like, what, this
Wow.
was 7 years ago. But that was all from what I started doing in July 2018. So I just always try to share that stuff like that, because people are always wondering like how they can improve. And I'm constantly telling the newbies, or even people who are mid-career, I'm like, yo, you're going to get to work and you're going to be surprised at how many people are not putting in extra effort, or they're just showing up, to where you doing a little bit more than the bare minimum is going to make you look like a rock star.
For sure. Yeah, 100%. And it's funny because we have a lot of synergies and overlap. Then when I responded to that incident, I actually was working night shift and I was on shift alone. So in those instances, when you're in that situation, God forbid I missed it. God forbid I just marked that as a false positive or benign because I was tired or lazy or whatever the case may be.
Or sleep.
Woo, or sleep. Yeah. Or sleep, or on a snooze. Yeah. So shout out to all the people working nights, because it's definitely not easy, for sure. But yeah, I agree with everything you said, for sure.
Yeah. And so here's one that I want your take on. There's this young man, he's just gotten his first SOC role, and he had a video that he made on his YouTube channel. I need to actually do a full reaction to it, because I found it very interesting by what the new people think. He pretty much stated that for the longest, he didn't tell people he was a SOC analyst because all he had heard before getting in the industry, that it was entry level, and he felt like it was comparable to help desk or whatever. And I commented in that video saying, hey, the only people who are saying working in a SOC is like the first starting point is like entry level, or a lot of the people who never did it, because the people who've done it don't necessarily call it entry level. And then I broke down the nuances. Like, of course, you have different models where in some instances it's entry level because you may be working for a service provider where all you're doing is just sending tickets over. In that case, yes. But now you got to know about multiple domains, and also knowing how to triage things that, like you said, never fired before. It's not just, hey, go to the KB, see what it says do, and then do it. No, some SOCs operate like that, and those are the bad SOCs because the analysts can't think. They want you to think. But what do you think about that? I know you train people who probably have either transferable skills, or they're coming from like help desk or something like that. I think they're different because, to me, they already have the skills. They just got to change the way that they think about threats. But in general, I don't think I'll probably say there's an exception to the rule. There are certain people I work with where I can put them in something in 3 months and they'll be good at it, versus some people who will take a little bit more time, where they need to help desk, to sysadmin that goes to work in the SOC. What do you think?
Nah, I think you hit it right on the head, to be honest. And I've worked with hundreds, maybe thousands of people. And, I've had people that I've trained to become security analysts. And I just want to put it out there for those of you who, hear the term SOC analyst. So different organizations refer to these titles interchangeably. So like, for example, a SOC analyst, security analysts are essentially one of the same. Information security analysts, security analysts. There's a lot of interchangeable references when it comes to this. I know SOC analysts making $180,000 a year. Would you call that entry level? So it really just depends. Now, what I do tell my clients is I try to avoid from using terms like tier 1 or T1 and T2, because then it limits right, people's perspective or perception on like what you're actually doing. And there's some instances where you could be in an environment and you can't, as a tier 2, you can't contain a host. It just depends on the environment and the infrastructure. And so in Cythority, in our training program, we don't teach people, how to become tier 1 or tier 2 analysts. We teach people how to do end-to-end incident response management, end-to-end security operations, understanding the cross functionality, and those core functions of a SOC, which, as I mentioned earlier, is your intelligence, your threat hunting, incident response, detection engineering, DFIR. Those are the primary domains, core functions of a mature security operations center. So I try to tell people not to reference or refer to themselves as a tier 1 or tier 2 analyst, because it's expected that when you come through this program that you operate as a seasoned security analyst who understands security operations in totality, and end to end. And so I don't think a SOC analyst role is necessarily entry level. You can be doing more entry level, or have more entry level responsibilities, especially if you're using the word triage a lot or you're performing triage. Naturally, we all have to, especially if there's a new alert that comes in. But as you grow gradually, you want to get away from using those vague terms like triage and monitor, because at the end of the day, what we're all striving towards is a more high performing organization. And that's why so many, hiring managers and companies are looking for people who have automation experience and who have the ability to mature teams and spin up projects and be able to, not just participate, but lead. And so, one of the things that we did recently was an automation. We performed an automation project where we were building a script in Python to perform threat enrichment, so that when we get these different types of alerts, the script will run and be able to pull the reputation score of those different indicators of compromise. And that's specifically valuable when you're doing threat hunting. Again, not more of like an entry level role that you would typically do within a SOC, but there's dedicated threat hunting teams that are building threat actor profiles based on different adversaries' activity, and then being able to identify those indicators of compromise. And then once you have that list of indicators, and for those listening, an indicator of compromise can be, anything malicious. It could be a domain, it could be a URL, an IP address, email address, hash, but it has a reputation that's malicious, meaning it's being used for bad or for malfeasant purposes. And so the script will then pull those indicators from a file, and then it will run it via an API lookup via VirusTotal or Abuse IP database. And there's other tools that you can set it up for, and then be able to return that reputation score and throw it into a CSV file. And that's extremely valuable when you're performing threat hunting and you have 1 million indicators or a couple thousand indicators. You can't manually look those up, or it'll just take you a very long time. And timing is everything in a SOC, because you have SLAs or service level agreements that contractually obligate you to respond within a certain time based on severity. And then just your mean time to investigate, your mean time to respond. These are metrics and KPIs that every SOC is striving towards lowering, because the sooner that you respond, the less of an impact there technically is in the event of an incident. So that was one thing that we did. And again, for the people listening, you really want to get into the habit of not just getting the skill set, but really being able to work on higher impact tasks and activities that make you seem more valuable.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head, especially with that. Also, like you said, with the automation, you got the AI, looking for problem solvers. And the one thing I talk about a lot with people that they don't think about is, I was like, very underrated, but if you have good soft skills working in IR and the South, like, for one, you're going to be pretty much probably working with so many different lines of business. Two, it can actually take you far, because you could probably, like you said, find yourself out of doing whatever you started doing to doing other things. Because, like, say for instance, you want to work more with the compliance team. you understand how it looks when those controls they put in place are not working properly because you're dealing with whatever alert or whatever it is, if it's a investigation or incident from it. So now you take that technical knowledge and you bring it to that team and you're able to display and talk about it in a different level that,
Yeah.
some people in GRC can't, because for the longest, and that's been the back and forth with the old age GRC to the new people, where they're saying, hey, we're tired of paper pushers. Y'all need to learn how to do some of this stuff.
For sure. Yeah, it's always a lot, especially if, like, from another angle, like if you go into like cybersecurity or tech sales and
Mm-hmm.
you started in a SOC and you're working hands-on keyboard with these tools, you'd probably be a way better salesman because you understand the actual technology, how it's used, its intent. So selling it at that point and educating, potential customers and prospects is a lot different because you've actually, pulled the curtain back, hands on keyboard, and understand how the product works.
Yeah, yeah. So let's see what we got. So you built a decade-long career at giants like Microsoft, Raytheon, GE Aerospace, and Michelin. What was the exact moment or tipping point that made you want to walk away from 380K and to start Cythority?
So it's funny because I started my first business back in 2020. I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. And I didn't really know this and think about it this way until a couple years ago, but I was an entrepreneur at like 5 years old. And, I grew up, like I said, 200% below the poverty line, food stamps, Section 8, public housing. For those of my after school program was the laundromat. I didn't go to after school program. I went to the laundromat 3 days a week, public laundromat. So, when I was growing up, my mom used to take me to the laundromat 3-4 days a week. And why she did laundry that much, don't ask. But I spent a good amount of time at the laundromat. And so they had these gumball machines. And so, she'd give me like $1 and I'd be able to buy for 25 cents these different toys within the gumball machine. It was like those, I don't
I
know if you
remember
guys
that.
remember. Yeah. But like those hands with the string attached that you can stick against the
Mm-hmm.
wall. I used to
Yep.
call them, just like gooey guys. That's where they were, just like toys that I like to play with. And so I would take those with me to school and I would sell them. I would sell them to the kids in class. They were a quarter in the laundromat and I would sell them for $1. And so I'd come home, because after in class, I'd sell them to these kids in the class. And then I would go to lunch and I would buy fruit snacks. So then I would take the $3-4 that I got and then I would go buy a bunch of fruit snacks and then I would sell fruit snacks and I come home with $20. My mom's looking at me like, how'd you get this money? And I'm like, oh, I sold my gooey guy and I got some fruit snacks and then I sold them at school. So that was like really, when I think about it, like really what kind of like introduced me to like being an entrepreneur. And so fast forward, I started a trucking company back in 2020. And I also started a clothing line as well as a training program. Now, it was a total different derivative of what it is now, but we only focused on cyber threat intelligence and we were limited to the types of tools that we had access to. Because if working in security, these licenses can be, godly expensive. A couple
Yep.
$100,000 for a CrowdStrike license or, some of these tools. Yes, you can get free instances or, credits towards maybe some of them, but they're awfully expensive. And so back in 2022, I rebranded the business as Cythority and I was able to build out a security operations center because I was always trying to figure out how can I build an experience for someone that is apples to apples. Like how can I take you to work with me? And because I realized that hands-on experience is the best teacher. And so it was just hard to figure out a way to I can't obviously take someone with me to work and show them the tools and the client information. So I had to figure out how to build this for myself and for other people. And that's exactly what we ended up doing, building out this infrastructure. And it kind of helped us morph as a company into an MSSP. Because then what ended up happening was I had this infrastructure with all these enterprise tools. And that experience, and then I had somebody reach out to me on LinkedIn for a contract opportunity with another corporation. This was a B2B contract, and they were looking for somebody to come on and manage their SOAR, which is a security orchestration, automation, and response tool. Think of it as like a SIM tool, but with automation capability. And so this customer reached out to me, and that's where I was able to introduce Cythority as an MSSP and begin to manage their environment, as well as 50 customers that they were managing. And so overnight, because of the work that we did, we kind of morphed into an MSSP, built that MSSP vertical in parallel with our incubator program that we spent a lot of time spinning up. So that was really what did it for me. And it was, a couple of years ago where I was like, yo, how can I take people to work with me? How can I give them an apples to apples experience so that they can take this experience and go get a job and be able to articulate themselves as if they already work in a live customer environment? Because let's face it, the certification farms and the boot camps or boot traps, they're just a self-paced repository of, or a dynamic library of self-paced modules, things you could watch on YouTube, or at best, maybe they're having you install Kali Linux on a VM, but you're not actually using the tools. And so I wanted to dismantle that and really provide an enrichment experience for people, no matter their background, train them and help them get deployed into an enterprise environment from day one.
No, that's nice, man. Especially, let me ask you this, because you brought up some key things and I had the thought in my head. Let me see if I can get it back. But okay, it was surrounded around the training enterprise environment to where, you have people applying for jobs, right? They have Cythority on their resume. And well, actually, let me backtrack. What I've also seen in the industry of the last 5 years when it's come to ed tech companies or similar companies where they have, like I said, a vertical where it's consulting, and they have clients where they're pretty much saying the clients work for them, is it goes one of two ways. One, certain people like what you're doing and they will acknowledge students are learning and actually working and getting enterprise level skill sets from your company, and they will like to hire them. And then the other way goes, if most of the people don't like how you market yourself or how you market your company or what they feel about your practices, they will start blacklisting people who use your services. How have you been able to navigate past all that type of stuff?
It's a good question. So when people articulate their experience with Cythority, publicly facing, we're an MSSP. So we're not a boot camp or a training program that's a certification farm. What is that? What do I mean by that? Certification farm, certification mill. There was a point in time where, we are a authorized delivery partner of CompTIA and accredited training center of EC Council. Those are the two largest, or want to say that one of the two biggest certification issuing entities. If you've heard anything about CompTIA Security Plus, A Plus, Network Plus, CYSA Plus, or EC Council's CEH, Certified Ethical Hacker, those are the issuing institutions that we are associated with from a certification perspective. Now, but publicly facing, being that we have real customers that we support from a managed security service perspective, publicly facing, it looks like people have a role at our company with a set of responsibilities that align with the job description. Now, on the back end, when it comes to hire right and them actually going through the background checks, we will provide from our HR department an employment and verification letter, which states the individual's role, the capacity in which they work at our organization, and the responsibilities that they hold within for the time frame that they've held within. And so they're not marketing themselves as a employee. They are putting this on their resume. They are putting this on their LinkedIn. And when they go through the background check, they're not having to provide W-2 and pay stubs because they're not getting paid. This serves as an unpaid internship on their resume. So therefore, they can get around the whole blacklist or improperly marketing themselves, because on their LinkedIn it actually is described as they withhold a role at our company, and the list of approved roles and how they can articulate themselves is internal. They have access to how they can do that. But on their LinkedIn, for example, they may have, threat hunter at Cythority, and then that little subset category will say internship. And so now when they're going through the background check, they can actually provide that employment and experience verification letter from our HR department, and that's usually suffice.
Yeah, I've seen people still have the internship thing, and they've gone through it. Like I have to go find, like, I'm talking about, I have like screenshots from like friends who sent me about certain people's programs that probably don't exist anymore. And whoever watching this, they can start probably racking their brains on whoever I'm speaking of in general. And you have people on Reddit forums and hiring managers like, yeah, we don't want to hire anybody from that place. Like literally, like it was crazy that disdain from the person who was the face of the company led to them not wanting to even entertain the students that spent a lot of money and put in work to try to get to those roles. So that was kind of really the lines of my thinking when asking that question. But I've came across so much. I think what you do that's different than they do is you post the trainings with the people where they're asking these questions as if, like, if they were on a real job and there was like training or people doing a walkthrough of an investigation. So I think that's where you built more credibility than other people, because truth be told, you don't know what these people are learning. They could just be saying whatever. So
right. Yeah. And, you make some really good point. And a lot of these different programs or training programs, they're built off the back of a certification. So they're preparing people, like a lot of these boot camps, their curriculum, which I hate that word, it gives me heebie-jeebies because it sounds like school, but their curriculum is built off of the back of a Security Plus. So at the core of what these people really know is Security Plus level multiple choice questions. And so they actually really don't have experience using enterprise tools like CrowdStrike or Splunk or Defender or Cortex. Like they're not actually using the tools in the training program, so they can't speak to them. And then also when you're communicating and articulating yourself, right, you have to be very careful with how you market that experience, because if you come in saying, well, I work for this company as an employee making this amount of money, and then it's time for you to provide W-2 and pay stubs, and you can't do that, well, now you got yourself in a pickle because you mismarketed and you misrepresented yourself. But when you get into an interview and you have the skills and experience, you could speak to it and articulate it and cross-reference that and align with the job description, and you build that confidence and trust, and you are clearly communicating your experience, then you typically don't run into an issue. A lot of times where I see people run into that issue is when they're falsely they're falsely representing, what they're doing, the capacity in which they're doing it, and they really just lack the experience that they're claiming to have. And that right there can get you, stuck between a rock and a hard place. And that's why we focus on the hands-on experience. That's why we give people access to the actual technology that they're directly going to be using in the roles that they're applying for. And we teach them how to market themselves and articulate themselves in an interview correctly so that they're not misrepresenting their experience.
Oh, perfect. Now, let me ask you this. How do people get started with Cythority?
Yeah, I mean, quite simple. We have a process for, vetting people. We don't just take anybody who wants to join our program, because realistically speaking, this isn't for everybody. Cybersecurity is not for everybody, but for those people who are committed, for the people who are coachable, then this potentially is for you. We've helped hundreds of people over the years. We've helped people with no experience whatsoever get jobs in. It's crazy. I don't even like to talk about how fast some people have gotten jobs with no experience, because I don't want to sell that. They're anomalies. And we've also helped people with just some general IT experience get jobs. And that varies depending upon the individual. Again, individual results vary. But if you're interested in learning more about Cythority, specifically joining our VSOC Incubator program, I can provide a link. It's vsocincubator.com. And that will put you through a form to fill out some questions so we can understand a little bit more about you. You can get on a call where we can go a little bit more into your background, skills, and experience, and see if there's an alignment, if this would be something that you would be, successful at. Like I said, for us, our brand vision and movement is building future leaders in cybersecurity, future ready security. And so we want to make sure that people actually possess the qualities and have the capability to be coached and actually execute on what it is that we're teaching, because we kind of built a system and a framework that is repeatable, that works. And so, yeah, vsocincubator.com. If you want to learn more, schedule some time to see if this program is a good fit for you. We also have a free school community. I know a lot of people do. Our free school community has over 500 members. We provide some free professional development resources there. I know personally, I've uploaded my professional resume template that I've used to generate over $100 million in salary offerings. That's in our free community there. There's cover letter, there's LinkedIn network. There's so much value you can get from the free community. But if you want the hands-on, fully immersive experience, that is a more selective process. And that's for people who are serious about securing their future and freedom in cyberspace.
Right, right. And so I want to make sure I'm correct. Dom, the cyber genius, because I do not want to butcher his last name. He's one of your more notable graduates from Cythority, correct?
Correct. Dominic Allegretti, aka Dom, the cyber genius, youngest in charge network. Yes, he's our prodigy, man. Dominic was one of those people I think I referenced earlier. Dom got a job with a Fortune 500 company 2 months before he graduated high school. I thought I did something spectacular graduating 2 months before getting a job 2 months before I graduated college. This young man got a Fortune 500 offer while he was still in high school. The manager actually held the offer because when he got the offer, he was still, playing sports, still didn't graduate high school. And ever since then, his career has taken off. He's gotten a job as an MSSP, just totally crushing it. So for those of you who know Dominic, he was one of our most prominent success stories. He's actually still in the program today. So he's still in the program because we've built so much. And a lot of times people will get jobs and then still stay into the program because they learn so much. We have arguably more technology deployed in our environment than most Fortune 500 companies. And the reason why I can say that confidently is because when you're working for an enterprise, they may have one SIM, one SOAR, one EDR. We, as an MSSP, have multiple SOAR, multiple EDR, multiple SIM tools. So we're not just training you in one particular technology. We acquire a vendor agnostic tech stack because we have to know different technologies based upon our customers, like I mentioned. So he's doing a lot of great things in threat hunting now, detection engineering, and really going above and beyond. So yeah, shout out to Dominic Allegretti, Dom the Cyber Genius.
Right. Yeah, no, I specifically brought him up too because I'm one of the people I love. If I'm going to do testimonials or something, like a lot of times my testimonials have a name and a face on LinkedIn where they can go look these people up. And so I'm very big on that. And much like you, one of my quickest client success stories was a week, but I don't say, hey, come get with me and I can help you in a week, because that was an anomaly. Like that don't normally happen. I was happy for him, but I tell people all the time, hey, I'm not the person that's hiring, so I can't promise you anything. But here's what I can promise that'll happen if you get with me. So that's pretty cool. Now let's do real quick some fun rapid fire questions. How do you feel about SOC and AI? We talked about it briefly, but I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, here's the thing. It's every industry, right? AI is being implemented at every level across all industries. And if it's not, your business is probably dying or dead. And so with that being said, I don't get fearful, when it comes to that. As a matter of fact, I have an agentic SOC company. And really, so, what that really means, how cybersecurity is being impacted by AI is it's improving the workflows, it's improving the response times, but it's not replacing people, right? If you have a basic tier 1 triage type of role, then yeah, you may be at risk because the initial triage of an incident can be automated. But there always is going to need to be a human intervention overseeing the AI. That'll never not be the case because cybersecurity is a mission critical role. It's the front line of defense and backbone of every company operating and existing on the internet today. And so if cybersecurity is fully automated, we most likely have an artificial intelligent president or a Terminator running the country. And at that point, I don't think there's much use for anyone. So I don't think, in my opinion, and my experience, AI is not replacing cybersecurity. It's just simply not going to happen. It can't happen. There's always going to need to be human intervention overseeing it. And that's why it's so important for those of you listening and who are learning to make sure you actually understand the workflow and the skill set of an analyst and cybersecurity professional, because there's going to be a point where you need to step in and the AI is not going to be working. But yeah, in terms of like just general implementation and automation, for sure, I'm seeing it. For example, we have a tool in our environment called CrowdStrike EDR I mentioned earlier, and CrowdStrike has a native AI agent built within Charlotte. Exactly. And so Charlotte does a great job of doing that initial triage, of writing that summary disposition of what happened. But it's not perfect, and it doesn't mean that you don't want to, put your human touch on it. A lot of people make that mistake of just copying what's in an LLM or Charlotte, or even uploading proprietary personal identifiable information into their LLM that they don't own. Big red flag, big no. And it's not that can actually get you in a lot of trouble. So, in environments that I've worked in, there's been some environments where we're not even allowed to put our information in the LLM. And there's been other environments where they're so pro AI, they use Claude like an operating system. So I'm seeing it being implemented. I'm seeing it used to improve workflows, response times. I don't think if you are a seasoned cybersecurity professional with a diverse skill set, that you're in trouble. I think it's, there's obviously AI implementation across every industry, and it's really just being used to help make teams more efficient. Now, with a grain of salt, with that being said, as we begin to adopt AI, I want to make this clear. When you sacrifice security for convenience, you do pay a hefty price, which is why we've been seeing an increase in cybercrime damages over the years. So last year, I think we crossed over $10.5 trillion in cybercrime damage. That's annually. That is the third largest economy after the US and China, if we were to measure cybercrime damage as in terms of GDP. So with that being said, as we use more AI and it's more adopted, the attack landscape is going to continue to expand, which is going to drive the demand for cybersecurity through the roof. And that's what we're seeing in the industry.
Yeah, no, spot on. Now, last fun question.
Yeah.
How do you measure SOC's maturity outside of metrics?
Oof, that's a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that question before. So how do we measure a SOC's maturity outside of metrics? And for those of you, again, listening, metrics are these key performance indicators. How can we, understand the actual math behind our response times? So how I would measure a SOC's performance outside of those metrics, I would say the team's ability to communicate specifically with stakeholders and leadership, so important. Understanding how the cybersecurity impact correlates with the business impact and making that correlation. I think like if you have a team of people that understand that, they're probably pretty good. Like they're probably, senior seasoned people, because they know how to attribute the cybersecurity impact to business risk and business impact. That right there, high performing SOC, high performing individual, high performing team. And communication is key because, again, we have to communicate and translate the technical findings with people who aren't technical, who don't give a damn about it, but they have their own set of priorities and what's important to them, which is business continuity. And so I think a key thing that I would say that we should all be looking out for is understanding how to communicate with those non-technical folks, those stakeholders, understanding the business impact and risk and how that correlates with cybersecurity. But communication is so big. And then how do we handle problems? How do we solve problems when we're faced with ambiguous situations? Because it's easy to automate things. It's easy to follow a run book or a playbook, but how do you perform when there's no playbook or where the playbook is deemed non-effective or not applicable? That is how a high-performing SOC needs to think. How do you deal with scenarios when you have ambiguous information or incomplete information? How resourceful are you? And that attributes back to the what? The leadership principle, frugality. If you don't have what you need, you have to make do with what you have. How do you handle those situations where you don't have all the information, you don't have all the tools, you don't have all the logs? How do you operate? What is the next step? People who can think outside of the box, more like creatives, more like artists, rather than robots, those are the people who are going to be successful. Those are the teams that are going to thrive in the AI revolution.
Yeah, no, facts, man. Now, for the listeners, because the watchers will be able to go see your information in the description, where can they keep up with you at?
Yeah, for those of you who want to follow me or interact, connect, I'm on all social media platforms, William TJ Sims. So that is on LinkedIn, that's on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, or X, all platforms, William TJ Sims, if you want to connect with me. And then in terms of the business, Cythority on all social media platforms. So yeah, that's how you guys can connect with me.
Perfect, guys. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. If you guys want a part 2 and you want this to be live or something like that, comment part 2 in the comment section and we'll see what we can do. Matter of fact, what we may do is figure out who's brave enough that wants to come up to do some like scenario-based questions and see how you fare. And we kind of just go from there.
But that'll be love, man.
Right. But until next time, it's your boy HD and I'm out.
Yo, HD, appreciate you having me, brother. Thank you so much.